Hi, Kate. It's great to see you. How's it going?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing really well, thank you. And thank you very much for joining us today on In Conversation. It's a great pleasure to have you here. So thanks for making some time out of your busy schedule.
And thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, to start with, can I just ask you where you're calling in from?
I am calling in from my current studio in the basement of my house in Maryland.
In Maryland, okay.
Mhm.
Okay. How's the temperatures up there?
Spring is just starting to break, and last year I built myself a screened-in lair with hanging Turkish lights all over the place, and I painted the walls, and so I'm going to start sleeping out there really soon.
Oh, wow, that sounds
Yeah.
awesome. Do you find that the winter is a creative time for you? Does the weather tend to help you sort of get creative, or do you find that the spring, when things are springing, does that tend to be your more creative period?
It's funny. I mean, I think I just hole up in the wintertime. I'm not really a winter person, so I do get a lot of work done, but I definitely get spring fever every time everything starts popping. And um, I find that it being Women's History Month in March, I'm always sort of off someplace, and I miss the blooming of all the first flowers, and so I'm happy to be home this March.
Oh, that's funny you said it. We'll be celebrating Women's History Month and International Women's Day with a few special promotions and opportunities, mainly just showcasing the work of our numerous female scholars and other people around the world. So yeah, I suggest that everyone keeps an eye out on the social media and other places, because we'll be doing a lot to celebrate Women's History Month. But we can get into that in a bit more detail later on. But I'd like to begin really by congratulating you on your new book, Art from Your Core, A Holistic Guide to Visual Voice, which of course was published by Intellect this month. The book is receiving rave reviews, selling well. So how do you feel? Relieved, overjoyed? Are you happy with how things
Um,
have come out? Too soon to tell.
it's too soon to tell.
Yeah.
Like, um, I'm definitely relieved because I've been working on it for a very long time. But it's very strange because as a visual artist, you finish something and you put it out there and you get immediate responses. And this is quite different because, um, some people have read the book. The people, that I asked to read the book, I've read the book, but I haven't gotten any feedback on people who are just reading it cold and just buying it. And so there's this strange lapse between, oh, I've got the book in my hand, and oh, what do people think about it? So um, I'm struggling with that, but I'm just sort of focused now on spreading the word about it and letting people know that it's out there and why it's out there.
Well, why it's out there, that seems like a good segue to me. The notion, a holistic guide to visual voice.
Mm.
Can you just tell us what that means, and maybe just use that as a springboard to sort of let us know a little bit about what the book's about in a nutshell, really?
Sure. I began thinking about how I could help some of my own students. So students who seem sort of stuck and they didn't know what they wanted to make art about. And as I went along, as I developed these ideas further, I started to think about the fact that it can't just be separate. It cannot be, oh, I'm going to read this book, or oh, I'm going to go into this class and I'm going to develop my own visual voice. It had to be holistic because I think there are a lot of forces at work in the world right now that actually pull people away from discovering their own visual voice. And I think that students and artists need to understand that artists don't just get these light bulb ideas. They have this sustained practice where they are researching and developing in the studio. And so I realized that it really had to be a book that would tear down some of the obstacles to finding visual voice, and then really sort of dig deep and get into what it means to have your own visual voice, not just a good idea, not just something for the next painting or the next series, but instead something that belongs to you, and it comes from knowing who you are, and it grows along with you as you and your artistic practice develop. And so that was the idea behind the need to call it a holistic development, because I think that's really critical to students who and artists in general. If you're trying to move on to the next level, if you're a professional artist, but you're sort of grasping at something and you can't quite get there, this is a way to sort of ground yourself as an artist and provide not just one starting point, but several starting points, and then share with artists how you decide which one of those things needs to come next.
Oh, well, I think the book certainly fulfills those goals, that's for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the structure, because I feel like the structure of the book is really powerful and probably quite important on how you take something quite ephemeral in a way and then add a lot of structure and scaffolding to it, so that your thoughts and processes are very usable and digestible by a different range of artists and people working in the arts. So can you tell us a little bit about the structure and tell us about the sections you chose and how you came to structure the book around those particular sections?
Well, I actually at a certain part of my process, I decided that the book needed to be almost like therapy, where we strip away all the things that you've learned that are not helping you develop your visual voice, and then build this core that belongs only to you, and then intensify that core. And so the same way that in therapy you're trying to live closer to your values, this is walking artists through a way that they can sort of shut out the noise and figure out how they're going to access this, voice that belongs only to them. And so I think that it needed to be structured in this way because, um, I had to interview different artists and see how do they access the unconscious, and where does their work come from. Um, it's informed primarily from decades and decades of talking to artists and also reading artists' biographies and autobiographies to see where the voice comes from. And sometimes it comes from very deep places, but other times parts of their voice come from experiences that you wouldn't have thought of, like a job that someone had. James Rosenquist was painting billboards, and ultimately when he started making fine art, they were painted in the same way, in the same scale as billboards. And so when you do your research and you find out about all of these different artists, you realize that, wow, it can come from almost anywhere. And the problem to me has always been that if you're a teacher, if you're a professor, and you've got 20 students in your class, how do you help them come to find their own voice? Because everyone's lexicon is different. It's developed in different ways. It comes to them, in their inspiration comes to them in different ways. And so I've been thinking about the book in such a way that I would be able to take all these individuals and walk them through a process that would give them totally different outcomes. And I think that's the problem in foundation programs and in visual arts programs, that we talk about subject matter, we talk about the form that the work takes, but we do not very often help them build that core. We might give them feedback on work that's already made, or we might, throw artist names at them and say, oh, you should look at this person. But, when it comes right down to each artist, they are the ones who know what is going to speak to them and what isn't. And so I just tried to come up with a system that would give this unique outcome to each person.
It sounds like the book comes in response to a set of distinct challenges. Were there any major challenges you faced in actually sort of writing the book, or undergoing the process of research, testing, that kind of thing? Because it sounds like you've really taken, like I said, like an ethereal, big topic and condensed it into something that's very manageable for people to understand and to come back to and refer to in a practical way, which I think is a great achievement. So yeah, tell us a bit about some of the challenges that you must have faced.
Oh, and probably the biggest challenge was writing this book during the pandemic,
Oh, wow.
because I had sort of, I had an easy couple of semesters in teaching, and I had set everything up to just focus completely on the book. And then we went virtual, and I, had to take all my classes online, and without a lot of computer experience beyond what I needed to run my class, I was staying up all night, making videos for my students to learn virtually. And then my daughter was in the next room while I was working, because I had to make sure she wasn't goofing off in front of her computer when she was learning online. And it was a challenge, I mean, I got a fellowship right after, like towards the end of the pandemic, and that helped me really focus because I didn't have to teach during that fellowship. So that was probably my biggest challenge. And I think that as I was writing the book, I was thinking that I was trying to maintain this kind of looseness, the same way that you would in the studio, where even though I had a strong idea of what I was doing and what I wanted to accomplish, I was really trying to sort of respond to the book as I was writing it and say, all right, it looks like there are a lot more obstacles to remove than I thought. So there's this, big part in the front of the book that is removing the obstacles, because the more I wrote, the more I realized, wow, there are so many obstacles. Social media has created a whole set of obstacles that artists have to navigate. And so I was just trying to be very fluid with listening to the book, the same way that I tell people to listen to their art and what their art wants to be. I needed to listen to my book and what my book wanted to be. And it was actually, my development editor, Yelena, who told me that. She's like, basically, you're taking what you are teaching to artists and you're applying it to this book. And so that was very helpful to me to hear that.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about timeliness as well, because I feel like that's an important topic with this book. So why is this book needed right now? Why is it so timely?
Well, there's several reasons. I think that what's happened in art departments is a lot of the barriers have been broken down between disciplines. So students don't have to choose to be a painter or a sculptor. They can move through the media. But what remains constant is the voice, right? And so if they start to work in fiber, they're still trying to sort of tap into their own voice. It's not like they're going to start over again and just leave all their past work behind. And so I was thinking about that and the fact that our teaching is evolving to not have these mediums based barriers, but um I think that a lot of it was from my own students, and there would be like freshman art students, and they would come into me in my class and they'd say like, I need to develop my style. And I'd be like, well, you know, you're 18 years old, and um you're trying to write a book, you're trying to make a cover basically for a book that has not yet been written.
Yeah.
And so I think that Instagram and a lot of other social media is responsible for that. It's like you take a course in Instagram and they're giving you this kind of format, and well, all the frames have to sort of have the same feel and blah blah blah. And so they're really kind of building this facade, and I think it's getting in the way of figuring out what they really need to make. So I was thinking about it that way. And I was also thinking about it's very timely because a lot of our institutions that help develop artists, meaning art schools and the art world itself, they've become very corporatized. And the result is that, students are supposed to develop some elevator speech uh,
Mm.
when they're a freshman or a sophomore. And I also feel as though like or approval culture is very problematic because, um, you know, I said to one student, I said, would you let a whole committee into your studio and let them tell you what to make? And they said, well, no, of course not. And I said, well, how is responding to likes any different? I was saying, gee, my blue paintings seem to get a lot more likes than my orange paintings. So um, we're teaching artists now to be entrepreneurs, which, you know, makes them no different from any other kind of entrepreneur. And I just think that artists have served you know, this position that is vital to humanity for centuries and centuries. And I feel like that's getting lost in the shuffle. I feel like that the um, the idea that art can change society, the idea that we can nudge the conversation along, that we can help shape civilization, the fact that, art used to be a part of the humanities, and it still is in some places, but in a lot of other places, it's not. It's this um, this notion that artists uh, shape ideas in our culture. And so I was looking at it both from, behind the scenes as artists, but also what the world outside is sort of trying to pigeonhole us into. And I just don't think it's good for artists. So I said so.
Thank you for that insight. Yeah, I think that's a really important point that we need to think about more regularly, and the effects of like culture, approval culture, and of course its connection with dopamine hits and addiction, and how how that affects people's process, practice, and the way things are being received and the way things are being funded. These are all really important questions. So thanks for highlighting that. And of course, the book is a really important part of dismantling that in a way as well. Well, thank you very much for those answers regarding the book, Art from Your Core, A Holistic Guide to Visual Voice, which is available from intellectbooks.com, the University of Chicago Press, and all good bookshops. So I do urge our listeners to go and check that out in more detail. I also, though, today, if you're game, I wanted to ask you a few more questions, questions I call quick time. So basically just need a short, sweet answer. If you're up for that, I'll ask you a few questions.
Sure.
Okay, so Kate, who are your favorite artists? They can be alive, they can be dead.
I would say Carol Walker, Violet Auvergne, Mark Lombardi, people who are truth tellers, people who are sort of standing up and in many cases taking the punches. Mark Lombardi died under mysterious circumstances for telling his truth. But, I just have tremendous respect for artists who are telling difficult truths that people don't necessarily want to confront.
Thank you. Great answer. Can you tell us briefly about a favorite exhibition that you've been to? Again, could be from any point in your life.
Well, I have to say there was a show at the Corcoran in Washington, D.C. called 30 Americans, and it blew me away so much that I took all of my classes to see it, and I went back to see it 2 or 3 times. And it's an exhibition of 30 Black artists from the Rubel collection. And they're pretty recent. They're from the past 2 or 3 decades, I believe. It was so provocative and it was so innovative with materials as well. And for me, that's sort of a double whammy. It's like when I go into a museum and I look at art, I'm always sort of seduced by what I see initially, but then I'm always walking up to the work and saying, "Who was that made?" And to
Yeah,
me,
me too.
sort of the quintessential work of art. And so, this exhibition really delivered on that. And I bought exhibition catalogs for several friends, and I still teach from that catalog.
Oh, thank you. Again, this is something that people can check out afterwards as well, and
Mhm.
hopefully go back and find some information about that exhibition. So it sounds like you, like me, are one of those people who starts by the benches or further back in the exhibit space, looking at the images, and then you get yourself so close to sort of see how things are made and deconstruct the work that you, like me, are one of the people where the attendants have to say, "Will you step back, please, ma'am?"
Always
Ma'am.
I always think about, I have some friends who do the headsets and walk through the museums,
Mm.
and I always think about the fact that they all seem to stand this certain distance from the
Yeah,
painting.
yeah.
And I think, I don't know if this remains in the book or not, but I always call it, the passive entertainment distance, because it's sort of the distance between a television and your couch.
Right, right.
And so they're listening to what's going on and they're looking at the painting and they're like, oh, but if I really love something, I'm going to pore over it and I'm going to figure out how it was made before I leave the room, basically.
But I like that. And it's amazing how you can look at a piece and it can be so beautiful and aesthetic in so many different ways from a distance. And then you look up close and the actual brush marks or the way the material has been applied to the canvas or to the surface is violent and so aggressive, let's say, and then it produces this totally different effect. I love that kind of stuff. So yeah, deconstructing the work is definitely something I would find myself doing as well. Well, jumping around a little bit then, do you have a favorite word?
A favorite word. Well, it's funny because we talked about this earlier, didn't we? Ineffable is one of my favorite words. It's always like, it's those are the things that are most powerful, right? The things we
Yeah,
can put into words. And then I don't know, luminescence, I just love.
that's, that's a good one. Luminescence. Yeah, I like that. I like that. What are you currently reading, or who are you currently reading?
Um, I always have a bunch of books open at the same
Yeah.
time. Excuse me. Right now I'm reading the book that most artists I know are reading, which is Get the Picture. And that's by Bianca Bosker, I think her name is. And what I'm interested in is the fact that people are just sort of describing it as a takedown of the art world. And like I said, I like truth tellers, right? So I'm maybe 2/3 of the way through that, but I was also very interested in how my book connected to hers, and like, are there going to be observations that she is making, because she spends time in a gallery and she works with artists and she works in a museum. And are there going to be observations that she's making from the outside that I touched on in my book, from the inside? And there are quite a few. And it's so fascinating to me, that she's coming to some of these same conclusions. And so that's the one that I'm actively reading right now.
Okay,
It's a
thank you.
great book.
It sounds like there could be some crossover as well, and people are reading yours and people are reading Bianca's, so you can, that's good. It's always good when you can draw those connections together.
Mhm.
Okay, and this isn't meant to sound negative in any way, but is there a book that you feel a little ashamed, perhaps, that you haven't read? There's, one of those grand magnum opuses,
Oh
or
boy.
a definitive classic. I think for me it's Anna Karenina.
I have to say with great shame that right next to my bed, like literally within my eyes view when I wake up, I just painted this beautiful, huge bookcase and put all my to read books in there. And I'm sure that there are hundreds of them. And I keep it's kind of exciting, but it's also very depressing because I keep thinking, well, when am I going to have time to read these? Because I'm always like really driven in my work. And so what I'm doing is sort of making sure that I'm putting aside the computer and then, grabbing one of the books. And I keep thinking, like, slowly but surely, I will make my way through these several hundred books. I've been for my own work, I've been reading all about this horrible stuff. My current work is called Bully Culture, and I've been working on it for almost a decade now. And the research that I've done is so intense that I've had to take a break from it. And so mostly what I've lined up now are all of these sort of connection to nature, beautifully written, like the braiding sweetgrass book, and just all of these books on the sentience of animals and things like that. And so I really feel like this summer I'm going to restore myself by at least reading a few of those books.
Oh, I like that. Well, and it sounds like although there's 700 books awaiting, awaiting a leap through, it sounds like you're the kind of person who must have read a lot over the period of your life. So I was wondering, would you have any books that you would recommend to an aspiring artist? You can't say your own, but
Of course.
but yeah, any books that have been influential in your own thinking, or you found to be really helpful?
I like Art and Fear. That's by Arthur Morey, I think, and David somebody, Bale, that's it. And that's very straightforward, and I think it holds a lot of information for students. And I'm trying to think what else. That's really my favorite. There's also the Twyla Thorpe book. I think it's called The Creative Habit, and that's a really good one that I recommend to my students who say, like, oh, I can't get motivated. Oh,
Mhm.
And so that's a really good book for that, developing that, daily habit of making art or researching or organizing your studio, whatever it is, just get there.
Okay, that sounds like some good homework topics for people to follow up on. Talking about your own work, I was wondering whether you prefer research, writing, or teaching, or whether you find it hard to distinguish between them.
Um, there's certainly a lot of overlap.
Mm.
I'm one of those people who gets immersed in things, and so my research is something that I love to just have unending days to do. So I often do artist residencies to fulfill that need. But I love my students, and I think that arming students with this tool, even if they're not going to be art majors, but telling them that, they can contribute to this idea of expressing themselves that people have been doing for, thousands and thousands of years, and that they possess that power. If they want to put forth the energy, they can leave their mark on the world. And it can also help them navigate, because it certainly has helped me navigate their lives. It's helped me through very difficult times in my life. So I do enjoy teaching. I don't enjoy any of the bureaucracy or anything like that. So I think if I could design something perfect, it would probably be something along the lines of the old system of, having a few students and really getting into it with them, and somehow having it be alongside my own practice.
Well, I guess I guess these things come in cycles. It's going to be like the 90s. They're going to come. Those old ways will come back with a bang soon enough.
I think so. People are talking about that.
You're not the first person who's highlighted that. I think there's definitely a desire to move back to some of those old methods of working and teaching in those smaller groups, and for things to be more practice led, but without the entrepreneurial aspect connected with everything. I think that's something that we're seeing in a lot of our books and journals as well. You did touch on something there I'd like to ask about as well. Is we encounter regularly these days this notion of artist, researcher, and teacher, and you speak about navigating. I was wondering, do you consider yourself artist, researcher, teacher, and do you find it difficult to navigate those three identities or those three roles, or do you find them actually to be quite symbiotic, sympathetic of each other, and do you find that to be?
I think about the writing that I kind of do for myself as being connected to my practice, and I certainly think of teaching as being connected to my practice. And it's always been difficult to teach for me if I have something that's taking me out of the studio, because I'm, kind of in the mindset of solving problems the way my students are. And if I'm not in that mindset, it's a little difficult. So I guess that I do find them somewhat symbiotic, but I also after all these years of teaching and after all these years of making, I guess I'm looking to really integrate them and find that perfect mix of flow where you're sharing information with other artists and you're making what you make and you're writing down your thoughts. This I've been writing my whole life because I give papers and things like that, but people keep teasing me and about being an author, and I keep saying I'm not an author. I'm just an artist and a teacher who has a lot to say.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you there. You're definitely an intellect author. That's how we consider you part of that community.
I understand that, and whenever I would walk by the Intellect booth while I was writing the book, I'd be like, oh my God, my book is going to be here someday. And with all of these people I'm so impressed by. So it's an interesting place that I find myself in there.
And I should say it was wonderful to have the book on display alongside with posters and flyers and other things at the recent College Art Association conference in Chicago. So wonderful to be able to unleash the book at such a an important venue as well, and for it to receive so much interest from such a wide variety of not only artists but also different scholars and people in the field as well. So truly, I mean, congratulations when I say it. Wonderful to see this book having making the impact and being a bit disruptive and having these effects. So really great to see. But of course, this book is our main priority for now, but you've alluded to a few things that you're actually working on that's going to be coming out in the future. So what are you working on? What can we expect from Kate Kretz in the future?
I have lots of things going on. That's the way it works for me. I'm actually in the studio. I'm working on what I hope will be a kind of capstone, huge piece for the work that I've been doing, ripping up mega hats and reconfiguring them. I'm wrapping up a chapter contribution on somebody else's book that I can't talk about yet. And then I have 3 writing projects that I'm trying to figure out what is going to come next. One is a sort of children's book that's not really a children's book that I need to write to save the world. And
Yeah.
and then one is about my bully culture work, and because I did so much research for it that I just made a huge bibliography, and I don't usually do that, but I sensed that the work that I was making was so controversial that I had to have facts to back it up. And so that's another one. That would be an academic one. But then I'm also thinking about a memoir too, because as I was writing this book, Art from Your Core, I was thinking so much about how academia has changed and how the art world has changed. And alongside that, I would say that I'm somebody who's recently been diagnosed as being gifted with autism. And so there are lots of women primarily who have been diagnosed late in life. And I think that my art shows all of that. I see a continuum. So and now there are lots of books being written by women who are diagnosed late. And so I think that I have a kind of different angle on my book. So that's another thing that I've been thinking about.
Cool.
Sorry, very long-winded.
No, it's great. It's great. And I think
on the burner,
Well, and we haven't really had much time to discuss it today, but you're no stranger to controversy, but you're also very much a celebrated artist in your own right. And well, basically, if someone wants to go and find out more about you, they can go online to intellectbooks.com and they can certainly buy the book and find out more about that project. But where can people go to maybe access your art or to find out a bit more about Kate Kretz, the artist, as well as the writer, teacher, scholar, and all the other hats you wear?
Well, I have a website, katekretz.com. It's pretty thorough. It goes way back, but it's also up to the minute. So that's probably the best place to get an overview. And yeah, I think that's probably it. I'm trying to set up one of those link things so people looking for very specific things will find it. And I'm hoping I'll get that done in a couple of weeks at least. Because I've given a lot of lectures on YouTube and stuff like that too. So
yeah, no, it's been wonderful to do some research around your work, your art, your thoughts, your thinking, and not just for today, but in terms of when we were getting ready to publish the book as well. So I'd urge people to really go give katekretz.com a good look, because there's some wonderful artwork up there and a lot of really interesting thoughts and processes to be discussed and discovered as well. But for today, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful having you on in conversation. Really enjoyed our conversation and our chat. And thank you for sharing all those insights, not only into your own work, but into kind of arts more generally speaking. So any final thoughts from you?
I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the book, because it's a project that I've been working on for decades and it's so dear to my heart. And it's a way for me to help the next generation of artists. And so thank you for all the opportunities you've given.
Oh, it's truly our pleasure. And so far, my own review and the reviews of many far more discerning artists, scholars, and critics than myself are all saying that you're very much achieving that goal with this book. So I'd just like to let everyone know that Art from Your Core, a holistic guide to visual voice by Kate Kretz, is now available from intellectbooks.com. So go give it a look and go and check out Kate's work online. Kate, again, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, James. I appreciate it.